I am continuing in my reading. What I'm doing in this series is to read through the entire standard works of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This consists of the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. I am continuing reading in a chronological order, according to event, not according to publication or volume, so I'm skipping around a bit as I move along. So we are now turning to Matthew. We've been reading in Luke about the birth of Christ, the circumcision he is brought to the temple when Mary goes to make her sacrifice required for the purification for giving birth. Simeon and Anna are both there, and they prophesy regarding Jesus and his future ministry. Among the Nephites, there are those who are beginning to argue that the law of Moses has been fulfilled, we can do away with it, but their error is corrected in this same year. This is all kind of the first year after Christ's birth. Now we're going to turn to Matthew, and we're going to read chapter 2. The wise men are directed by a star to Jesus. Joseph takes the child to Egypt. Herod slays the children in Bethlehem. Jesus is taken to Nazareth to dwell. Now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east, and are come to worship him. When Herod the king had heard these things, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And when he had gathered all the chief priests and scribes of the people together, he demanded of them where Christ should be born. And they said unto him, In Bethlehem of Judea. For thus it is written by the prophet, And thou, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, art not the least among the princes of Judah, for out of thee shall come a governor, that shall rule my people Israel. Then Herod, when he had privily called the wise men, inquired of them diligently what time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, and said, Go and search diligently for the young child, and when ye have found him, bring me word again, that I may come and worship him also. When they had heard the king, they departed. And lo, the star which they saw in the east went before them, till it came and stood over where the young child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. How many wise men were there? We don't really know. It just says wise men. We generally depict 3 in art and everything because there are 3 gifts, but it doesn't really specify how many there were. Now, there are some people, a lot of historians, a lot of scholars will tell you that these wise men were the magi of the eastern lands, like Persia, Babylon. These were the wizards, or possibly of the Zoroastrian religion. But this is not true. These were prophets. Remember that at this time there are still communities of Jews in Babylon, in Persia, even farther east out there. There are some down in Egypt, there are some in Greece. The Jews have already been scattered. And so the wise men coming from the east, these are Jewish prophets, Israelite prophets, coming from the east, probably coming from as far away as Persia. But they're definitely prophets. They definitely have the Spirit of the Lord with them because they see the star, they recognize it, and they follow it. Now, they come into Jerusalem, and they don't go straight to the king. They just start asking, where's Christ? They kind of assumed that the Jews would have been expecting Christ. They thought that everybody would be worshiping Christ already. And so they come in, they say, Where is he? We've come to join the worship service. But nobody knows who they're talking about. The word gets to Herod. The rumors start spreading through the town. Word gets to Herod, and he calls in the council and he asks about this, and they mention the prophecy. Now, this prophecy is from Micah. He's the only prophet that we have in the Old Testament, anyways, that prophesied of Bethlehem. Micah chapter 5. And then it says he calls the wise men to him. So he brought the council in, learns what's going on. Then he calls the wise men in. He asks them when the star appeared, meaning that Herod did not notice the star. It apparently was not noticeable to those who did not have the Spirit. And so they tell him, and he says, okay, well, I learned from the scribes that Christ should be in Bethlehem. Go find him. Again, nobody in Jerusalem knows what they're talking about. The angels appeared to the shepherds, and all this happened in Bethlehem. The word hasn't spread. Mary and Joseph would probably have been keeping a fairly low profile. But when they hear Herod, Herod sends them off, and then they go and they notice the star is leading them. See, they followed the star out here because the star is over Israel. And they come out and they're asking around, and now when Herod tells them to go to Bethlehem, they start going and they notice, they see the star, and the star is actually guiding them now. Very interesting. We pick it up now in verse 11. And when they were come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented unto him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. And being warned of God in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed into their own country another way. And when they were departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, Arise, and take the young child and his mother, and flee into Egypt, and be thou there until I bring thee word. For Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. When he arose, he took the young child and his mother by night, and departed into Egypt, and was there until the death of Herod, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken of the Lord by the prophet, saying, Out of Egypt have I called my son. This also shows us that the wise men had the gift of prophecy. The angel appears to them, warns them to not go back to Herod. And immediately that same night, the same night that the wise men left, the angel appeared to Joseph and told him to get out of there. Get out of Dodge. Get down to Egypt. And so he doesn't hesitate. As soon as he wakes up, he grabs his wife, he grabs the boy, and they leave. And all this again to fulfill prophecy. I mean, he could have gone other places, could have fled to other places, but we are fulfilling prophecy, as Matthew is pointing out. Now, I do want to say about these gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Gold, first of all, is a symbol of royalty, the crown, the kingdom. Frankincense is a incense burnt in the temple and is kind of symbolic of the holiness of the temple and the Lord and God. And myrrh is an herb that is used in burial practices to kind of preserve the body, or at least make it smell better. And so in these three gifts weren't given just randomly. They are symbolic of Christ as King, as God, and as the sacrifice, the atonement. That's what the myrrh sacrifices, his death and resurrection. So these gifts were very purposely chosen. But let us read the rest of this chapter. We got starting in verse 16. Then Herod, when he saw that he was mocked of the wise men, was exceeding wroth, and sent forth and slew all the children that were in Bethlehem, and in all the coasts thereof, from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had diligently inquired of the wise men. Then was fulfilled that which was spoken by Jeremy the prophet, saying, In Ramah was there a voice heard, lamentation and weeping, a great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, and would not be comforted, because they are not. This tells us about when the wise men arrived. In most artistic renderings and most, plays and videos and all that, they all arrive, the shepherds and the wise men all come when Christ is born in the manger. But Herod here tells us that the wise men came about 2 years later, because he inquired of them, when did the star appear? And they told him. And when they leave without coming back to him, and he realizes this, it'll probably takes him several days. Might even take him up to a month before he realized that they got out of town without coming back to him. And so he kills all the children from the age of 2 and under, which means after the birth of Christ, the star first appears when Christ is born, and it guides the wise men for about 2 years, at which point Herod goes out and kills all the children. I think Herod probably increased the age. He rounded up just to be on the safe side. But this is a year and a half, 20, 22 months later. This is not anywhere near the time of Christ's actual birth. That's also why it states that when they were come into the house and not into the manger, into the stable, they were, by this time, Joseph and Mary were living in a house in Bethlehem, probably with some relatives. And this is also why I read this after I read some portion of 3rd Nephi, because we read the kind of what happened during the first year after Christ's birth in 3rd Nephi. This is in the 2nd year. Now let's finish this out. Verse 19. But when Herod was dead, behold, an angel of the Lord appeareth in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, saying, Arise, and take the young child and his mother, and go into the land of Israel, for they are dead which sought the young child's life. And he arose and took the young child and his mother, and came into the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus did reign in Judea in the room of his father Herod, he was afraid to go thither. Notwithstanding, being warned of God in a dream, he turned aside into the parts of Galilee. And he came and dwelt in a city called Nazareth, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophets, He shall be called a Nazarene. Now the angel, I think this is still Gabriel. I think he's the angel that's involved in all of this. Herod dies, and the angel says, okay, go back up to Israel. When Joseph goes up to Israel, he realizes that Herod's son is now king, and he's a bit worried. Herod tried to kill him. His son will probably try and kill him. But the angel said, don't go back to Egypt. We need you here in Israel. And so Joseph says, okay, I'll go up to Galilee instead, because Judea and Galilee were two separate provinces at this time. After Herod, so I think Herod may have ruled over both areas. He ruled over a much wider area, but once Herod died, it was all divided up. And so he goes up into Galilee, so he's not under the direct rule of Herod's son. Now, a brief note on Herod himself. Herod in history is known to be somewhat insane, jealous man. Yeah, I think he killed two of his sons, he killed his brother, he killed a wife or two. He was just not a good man. The idea that a new king being born, Christ, who is the King of the Jews, that's what the wise men were saying. Herod would not have tolerated that. It falls in line with what we know about him from history. Also note, in Luke, we read that after they went to the temple, that they went up to Nazareth. But this is what's happening between the temple and going to Nazareth. We have about a year and a half, or a little over, before they flee down into Egypt. And I think Herod dies in like the 5th or 6th year after Christ's birth. And so Luke kind of skips over these 5 or 6 years of history. Matthew fills in some of the gaps here. And we are now in Nazareth. So after this we're going to read the Joseph Smith translation in a separate video. Then we will turn back to 3rd Nephi. So I will see you there.